Hello, puppies and kittens. We're running with a slightly more trimmed staff. We've decided that we're going to be discussing the Hebrew Bible. We should only have Jewish consultants. So that's what I've been limited to. Various other people have had, for whatever reason, to skip the day. But
how dare they?
at least, yeah, yeah. But as I said, as Lawrence pointed out, okay, well, the three that you got are at least good at Jewish. Okay. All right. Anybody have any opening comments?
Yeah, this chapter is about the scapegoat, or yeah,
An
or at
interesting
least
notion.
oh.
I have a hard time understanding how people adopted this.
So this one specifically, it's actually been really hard to tell, historically speaking, the kind of composition or traditional history here, because the actual prescriptions, like each separate law, is actually no. Am I thinking of? Oh no, we're not there. I'm thinking of chapter 17. Yeah, that's this one's a little bit different.
Yes.
Yeah, but once we get to chapter 17, that one is rough. I'm all out of order here. But
yeah.
Okay.
And, I think I should read.
Okay.
Yeah. The scapegoat is part of this. We're going to be talking about the Yom Kippur service, and it is a bit weirdly written. Lawrence was saying like it's hard to tell when this was written, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also a follow-up to chapter. It is also the follow-up to chapter 10, and not chapter 15. But there is a comment by Ibn Ezra, but I'll get to that.
Yeah, because it like goes directly. It should be going directly after that, which is why everything in between is thought to be a unit.
Yeah.
Like you'll see it in the very first verse.
Yes, exactly. Okay, I'll read this entire chapter. Okay, I'm reading for the JPS version. The Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron who died when they drew too close to the presence of the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell your brother Aaron that he is not to come at will into the shrine behind the curtain, in front of the cover that is upon the ark, lest he die. For I appear in the cloud over the cover. Thus only shall Aaron enter the shrine, with a bull of the herd for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. He shall be dressed in a sacred linen tunic with linen breeches next to his flesh, and be girt with a linen sash, and he shall wear a linen turban. They are sacred vestments. He shall bathe his body in water and then put them on. And from the Israelite community he shall take 2 he-goats for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. Aaron is to offer."
Hold on a second. We got this uber galactic overlord who just commands all these different galaxies at once. But he's really particular about what kind of Iron Age rag you have on.
Yeah, so this served as a way to, because if you're the author, if you are the priestly author, if you are going into this trying to justify your own position in society, you are going to try to like mark yourself out somehow. You are going to try to stand out and make it a very special position, a very important one. So like the stuff we get earlier about the if you remember with the golden calf narrative, the Levites were the ones who survived. And or like all the Levites survived, and that serves an ideological purpose. So it serves like a purpose of describing the origin of it. And if you have that kind of origin story, and then later you have this probably would have been first actually, but or earlier I should say. So if you have something like this to justify your own position in society, you are going to mention the things that you believe give you that position. So in this case, this certain garb that they would have worn, that they probably have been wearing for a while at least, is the thing that gives him authority, so he is going to write it into his code.
Okay, I'll continue. Aaron is to offer his own bull of sin offering to make expiation for himself and for his household. Aaron shall take the 2 he-goats and let them stand before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And he shall place lots upon the 2 goats, one marked for the Lord and the other marked for Azazel. Aaron shall bring forward the goat designated by lot for the Lord, which he is to offer as a sin offering, while the goat designated by lot for Azazel shall be left standing alive before the Lord to make expiation with it and to send it off to the wilderness for Azazel. Aaron shall then offer his bull of sin offering to make expiation for himself and his household. He shall slaughter his bull of sin offering. And he shall take a panful of glowing coals scooped from the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of finely ground aromatic incense, and bring this behind the curtain. He shall put the incense on the fire before the Lord, so that the cloud from the incense screens the cover that is over the ark of the pact, lest he die. He shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger over the cover on the east side, and in front of the cover he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times. He shall then slaughter the people's goat of sin offering, bring its blood behind the curtain, and do with its blood as he has done with the blood of the bull. He shall sprinkle it over the cover and in front of the cover. Thus he shall purge the shrine of the uncleanness and transgression of the Israelites, whatever their sins, and he shall do the same for the tent of meeting, which abides with them in the midst of their uncleanness. When he goes in to make expiation in the shrine, nobody else shall be in the tent of meeting until he comes out. When he has made expiation for himself and his household, and for the whole congregation of Israel, he shall go out to the altar that is before the Lord and purge it. He shall take some of the blood of the bull and of the goat and apply it to each of the horns of the altar. And the rest of the blood he shall sprinkle it on it with his finger 7 times. Thus he shall cleanse it of the uncleanness of the Israelites and consecrate it. When he has finished purging the shrine, the tent of meeting, and the altar, the live goat shall be brought forward. Aaron shall lay both his hands upon the head of the live goat and confess over it all the iniquities and transgressions of the Israelites, whatever their sins, putting them on the head of the goat, and it shall be sent off to the wilderness through a designated man. Thus the goat shall carry on it all their iniquities to an inaccessible region, and the goat shall be set free in the wilderness. And Aaron shall go into the tent of meeting, take off the linen vestments that he put on when he entered the shrine, and leave them there. He shall bathe his body in water in the holy precinct, and put on his vestments. Then he shall come out and offer his burnt offering and the burnt offering of the people, making expiation for himself and for the people. The fat of the sin offering he shall turn into smoke on the altar. He who set the Azazel goat free shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water. After that he may re-enter the camp. The bull of sin offering and the goat of sin offering, whose blood was brought in to purge the shrine, shall be taken outside the camp, and their hides, flesh, and dung shall be consumed in fire. He who burned them shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water. After that he may re-enter the camp. And this shall be to you a law for all time. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you shall practice self-denial, and you shall do no manner of work, neither the citizen nor the alien who resides among you. For on this day atonement shall be made for you to cleanse you of all your sins. You shall be clean before the Lord. It shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for you, and you shall practice self-denial. It is a law for all time. The priest
And
who has
do
anointed
you
and
still
ordained...
do you still observe that?
It's Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur, yes. I'll just finish this chapter. The priest who has been
All of
anointed and ordained
okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
to serve as priest in place of his father shall make expiation. He shall put on the linen vestments, the sacred vestments. He shall purge the innermost shrine. He shall purge the tent of meeting and the altar, and he shall make expiation for the priests and for all the people of the congregation. This shall be to you a law for all time, to make atonement for the Israelites for all their sins once a year. And Moses did as the Lord had commanded him.
Okay. So you still do the bull blood thing?
No.
It's mostly prayers.
Okay,
Yeah, so
it's not a law for all time.
It is a law for all time, but
But the thing is, this is supposed to be, of course, the temple.
Yes,
But
during
without
the
the temple, you can't really do that kind of stuff. So while this was supposed to be a law for all time, without a temple, you can't really do that. So during periods of exile or strife, or when there's not a temple, the Jews had to adapt and improvise, and they've been doing that all throughout history. I mean, you talk about your actual, like the Babylonian exile. You talk about, right after the destruction of the temple in 70 CE, they had to adapt again. You talk about certain diaspora communities, like the one in Elephantine, for example. They have their own traditions now, based, built on the fact that they no longer have this temple. So they had to change it over time.
Yeah, one of the main things is that all of the rituals that were done in the temple were are turned into prayers.
Yeah.
So like everything, that all of this stuff about the high priest does this, and then he changes his clothes, and then he does that, and he changes his clothes, and all that. All of this is like part of the prayers on the day. And the afflict yourselves, where it says like practice self-denial, that's kind of Jewish people on Yom
fasting,
Kippur,
right?
they fast.
Yeah,
They
that's
fast
fasting.
and they don't wear leather shoes and they don't bathe. And I think there's another one which is like they can't like smell incense or something like that.
Well, once again, I think we went over it last time on Wednesday, the transferring of sins onto something else and then sending it out. So we see the same kind of thing again, except this time it's an actual scapegoat.
Yeah.
two of them.
Yeah.
So the idea
one's slaughtered and one is a scapegoat.
Right. Yeah. One's for sins, one's for the sacrifice.
In every chapter we read, I always find evidence against the very belief that this thing is trying to promote. And this, I think, is a really good example of it. I just can't logically imagine how an actual God, like the modern concept of God, what apologists would argue for.
God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Mr. Nelson.
Yeah. And he has these kind of requirements. He's very specific. You got it 7 times with the sprinkling of the blood. And this is going to be a law for all time, except for all those things that I can't predict.
Yeah, run those. But even then, like the thing is, their theology adapts to those as well. Because, like, let's say for the exile, for example, throughout the Deuteronomistic history, which we will get to. So once we get to Deuteronomy or I should say Joshua, really. Well, Joshua through 2 Kings, excluding Ruth, you will notice that God is the one who is sending the Babylonians to destroy Israel. That is their punishment. But then he also is mad at the Babylonians because they destroyed Israel. So it's very what's the word I'm looking for? Inconsistent. I don't know if it's inconsistent or if he just has mood swings or what it may be.
I've had the idea like that, God wanted to punish them, but it didn't have to be that specific nation that did it.
Except he says specifically that I have sent them to punish you.
But it's kind of like, I think it's a spiritual idea, like the angel of that nation kind of volunteered themselves, if that makes sense.
I hate the use of spiritual as an excuse for any interpretation of the text, because anytime it says something that clearly a contradiction, I'm told that it's not a contradiction. You just have to read it in the spirit, or it's a spiritual interpretation. The fuck does that mean?
Yeah, it depends on what it is, really. Like if you're talking about faith, or if you're talking about what's it called, like a hyperbolic statement, which we find throughout these books, then I could kind of see where they're getting at. But the thing is, it always depends on the type of text you're talking about. If you're talking about a more narrative prose kind of thing, or if you're talking about a piety kind of, like a text specifically for piety, it really depends on the genre that we're talking about. And in some books, it's going to be none of those. In some books, might just be just for entertainment purposes. And it's unclear how seriously they would have taken them initially. So it does depend on the genre, and a lot of the time biblical scholars will spend a lot of time trying to decide what genre something is. Like for the Book of Esther, the amount of speculated genres that it could be is essentially all of them. I think the only one that they've ruled out completely has been like a wisdom text. That's like the only type they've entirely ruled out for that one. But once you figure out the kind of text it was meant to be and the time period it was written, it gets a lot easier to determine what in it is meant to be taken very literally, what should be taken for all time, and other questions just kind of fall away from that. But a lot of the time it is hard to tell because we're reading stuff that was written thousands of years ago and in a context that is nothing like our own. So to suggest that we will intrinsically understand the type of story they're telling or the type of philosophy that they have, you could call it philosophy, but you can call it theology, whatever you want to call it, the kind of worldview that they have, like we can't just understand it intrinsically because over so many years, like it has been like we as a culture have developed our own ideas about how things should be read and understood, and we can't superimpose that onto thousands of years ago. It would be improper. Like I'm sure you know this, Arn, with those Venus statuettes, those Venus figurines that they found. Like I would understand the interpretation of like fertility idols, something to do with fertility. But once they start to get more specific, like, oh, these were used, to like turn the guys on or some shit like that, I'm like, you're just reading it into that because you're turned on by this. Like, you cannot superimpose the ideals of today onto the past so simply. Like, it's not that easy. So in the same way, we have to read these things with critical eyes, but not have like but we have to understand those ancient concepts as well. And
No, I'm with you there, and I do. But the thing that I'm reflecting back on is the times that I've encountered a serious theologian who's tried to get very lofty in their analysis of why they're a creationist. Seriously, and I'm wondering just how somebody with a PhD in theology, or what is it, a THD? How somebody like that can seriously defend these ridiculous rituals with the sprinkling of the blood everywhere, and how that's a requirement for the type of God that they tell me that I should be talking about, and not the type of God that the biblical literalist is talking about.
yeah,
That the Kent Hovens types are talking about. That I should talk to serious theologians.
right.
All
Like
right.
I'm
Well,
sure
let's get your sophisticated guy and have him explain this.
right. Well, I'm sure like the someone who actually has studied theology probably has a better chance of explaining things than someone like Hovind, but still, if
And I
they,
grant that, but
yeah.
not everything is defensible.
right, exactly. So sometimes they go with the argument that this was like our baby steps into it. Like I forget which church father argues it, but he was like, well, these were our first steps, right? He can't give us the whole truth right away because we wouldn't be able to handle it, and there are logical issues with that because he decides how much we can handle, right? But yeah, that is an argument that has been used, and they all do kind of seem, I don't know about illogical, but certainly irrational. There's not much thought that's being put into it. Like nothing that they say is actually defying logic, so I'm not going to call it illogical, but it is irrational. So
Yeah, that's one way to put it. Yeah.
yeah.
So Mighty Chicken puts in a comment and says, "But isn't that just a bit too convenient, though? Just because there's no temple, now there are new rules. God put these rules out there, though. I just don't get how they can wiggle out of this one. Mighty
Right.
Chicken, why are you sending us text messages? Why the hell am I not hearing your voice?"
Yeah.
Well, I actually think that this is like a positive thing when it comes to Judaism. They adapt to new.
I thought you were going to say it's a positive
situations.
thing that we can't hear Mighty Chicken's voice.
Oh, no. It's just like I think there is another commandment that says listen to the wise men or the sages, and it's like the sages that are the Chazal, and they are like they determine the rules, something like this. But I think it's in Deuteronomy. I don't remember exactly. But basically, it's just like I would say that Judaism is also like an ethnicity, and I think during the times of the end of the Second Temple, there was like a serious like existential threat when it comes to Judaism. And once
Right,
the
without a
temple is
temple.
gone, yeah, there's no Judaism. And so they were like, oh, what are we going to do? Oh, we're going to do like other stuff to preserve the tradition. Well, we don't have temples. Let's do something else.
Yeah,
Okay, so Mighty
yeah.
Chicken throws in that he's not very screen ready today, if you get my meaning. Well, you shouldn't have worn your beauty mask this morning.
Yeah. So I
Um,
have this I have this translation, English translation of Leviticus here that is very, the translation takes like Rashi into the translation as well, like there's brackets and stuff. So it actually doesn't, it actually says the bit about this will be an eternal statute for you, it says in brackets, Yom Kippur will be an eternal statute for you. So not every little detail, they're like, oh, so yeah, they kind of add in their interpretation and say, well, God is saying you should keep the Day of Atonement in your own way for all eternity, not necessarily in the exact way. If you don't have a temple, you can't do the temple way, so you have to do it in another way. Don't work, that's what they keep, and afflict yourself, and that's probably basic it really.
Okay, I'll start my commentary. Verse 1. This verse is the follow-up to chapter 10. This verse is the follow-up to chapter 10, with chapters 11 to 15 comprising a section regarding impurity laws. Paran speculates that these chapters appear before chapter 16, which deals with purification and disinfection, to clarify what impurities require disinfecting the temple. Ibn Ezra, however, notes the continuation with chapter 15, where the Israelites are warned about their uncleanness so that they won't die, like how Aaron's being warned in this chapter, verse 2. Verse 2, the Lord said to Moses, Milgrom comments, these words begin the long unit of verses 2 to 28, which had an independent existence before it was linked to verse 1 and given an appendix, verses 29 to 34. If this verse were really the continuation of verse 1, it would have begun with the words Vayomer Elav, and spoke to him, as seen in Exodus 7:26, 8:16, Leviticus 1:2, etc. For I will appear in the cloud. Most traditional commentators and Targums Pseudo-Jonathan interpret the cloud as God's glory, in Hebrew kavod, since the kavod was depicted as a cloud with fire burning inside it, as seen in Exodus 40 verses 34 to 35 and Numbers 4 verses 15 to 23. Others, like the Sifra, Talmud, Yoma 53a, and Ibn Ezra, interpret the cloud as the cloud of incense that is produced by the high priest at verse 13. Levine, however, rejects this interpretation, since the statement, for I appear in the cloud, explains why Aaron is prohibited from entering the Holy of Holies. Moreover, the cloud in verse 2 protected God, as it were, whereas the cloud in verse 13 protected the high priest, who came into God's immediate presence. Verse 5, 2 male goats for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. Milgrom comments, the prescription for the people, a chata'at sin offering he-goat and an olah burnt offering ram, follows more closely that of Leviticus 9:3 than 4:14. The he-goat for Azazel was not a sacrifice. Here then, the term chata'at may have been chosen for its philological sense, that which removes sin, which precisely defines the function of the scapegoat. Alternatively, like the ashes of the red cow, also termed a chata'at in Numbers 19 verses 9 and 17, this sacrificial label may represent the attempt of the priestly legislators to incorporate what originally was a pagan rite into Israel's sacrificial system. Verse
Yeah, they
8.
did that a lot. They
Yes,
would
they
take
did.
the thing is, for them, it was less about like taking from another religion, as it was like, oh, here is what people from around the area are doing. and it just became kind of just a cultural thing at some point that was associated with multiple religions. So it wasn't like they're doing like, oh, this one specific thing, and they're like, we're gonna take that idea. No, the thing is, many cultures had rites that were like this, probably stemming from the same type of ritual. So so it's not like they viewed this as, some heretical sin or anything like that. They I saw a Mighty Chicken in the chat.
Hey,
Hey guys, you convinced me. I'm gonna just go as an avatar and pull Cardad P-Town's category here.
yeah,
So essentially, it wasn't viewed as like, oh, we're taking from another belief system. No, they were taking from the culture. Like if we were to start some kind of not like a ritual like this necessarily, but if we were to start some kind of ritual or ceremony today, it would be it would have some basis in our culture. So, and it's not like, even if we took something that was initially like a Christian rite or something, and like, kind of adapted it slowly, like it would just be like a cultural thing more than it would be taking from another faith. And that's kind of something that's missed a lot of the time. Now, to me, that speaks of the humanness of this of this belief, and in fact, all these beliefs, that they are human conceptions. But yeah, I hear that a lot as like a criticism of these things, and I'm like, they didn't really see that as an issue. Like it's an issue for maybe modern like biblical literalists or something like that, but it wouldn't have been an issue for them back then.
Just a quick thing to say, Peter, can you please revert to? I can only see RN in the full screen.
I also can only see
Me
Arn.
too.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I think it looks great, but
But yeah, but apparently everyone else, it looks like it's just normal for them, which is good.
Yeah, it makes sense because that's what's streamed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say like it's not like the Israelites were monotheistic and then they were adopting foreign pagan practices. They were originally what's the word?
Well, they
Not pagan, but they would have
been polytheists and then henotheists.
Yeah, exactly. So they would have had their own cultural, history that they were kind of trying to rewrite into a monotheistic context. So it could have been these ritual practices and stuff that they had been doing all this time might have been associated with a different god or whatever, but then or El or whatever, then it became part of the Yahweh cult.
Yeah, there's I've been reading a pretty good book on stuff that's like that. I actually posted it in the Discord recently.
Aaron, I see a question which is actually relevant right now.
All right, just a minute. Let me go click on that. I'm having difficulty because I'm handcuffed.
All right, I'll read it. Matt White, Tomer, please comment on the origin of Azazel, how they're related to Shaitan the oppressor. Cheers.
I'm not sure about Shaitan, but here it goes. The scapegoat in verse 8. In Hebrew, it's Azazel. There are three main views regarding the Azazel. One, it refers to a certain place where the goat was sent off to and is synonymous with the remote place, Eretz Gezerah, from verse 22. Rashi, based on Talmud Yoma 67b, writes that Azazel was a high mountain that was, quote, strong and hard, end quote. Targums Student Jonathan describes it in verse 10, a place rough and hard. Yes.
Wait, so rocks are hard. Okay, good to know.
Meaning, like, if you fell off the cliff, you would die because it was like very rocky and jagged.
Azazel should be like somebody's porn name.
Yeah, man.
Sa'ad Gaon renders Azazel as Mount Azaz. By this view, verse 8 should be read the other two Azazel. The second view is it refers to the goat, reading Azazel as a contraction of Ez, goat, and Azal, to go away, and so it means the goat that goes away. This view is expressed in the Septuagint, Vulgate, and Mishnah Yoma 6.2. This view led to the English word scapegoat from scapegoat and first appeared in Tyndale's translation from 1530. And the third view is that it refers to a demon. The wilderness was believed to be inhabited by demons, as seen in Old Testament texts like Isaiah 13:21, 34:14, apocryphal texts like Baruch 4:35, Tobit 8:3, and New Testament texts like Matthew 12:34, Luke 11:24, and Revelations 18:2. In 1 Enoch 10, verses 45, the angel Raphael is commanded to restrain the demon Azazel, banish him to a wilderness called Dudael, and cover him with sharp rocks. Moreover, the parallel between Azazel and Yehovah in verse 8 suggests that Azazel was the name of a divine being. Nachmanides, Milgrom, and Levine support this view, with Milgrom saying that the priestly legislators removed the demonic powers of Azazel and turned him into a place to which impurities and sins are banished. Quoting Theodore Gaster, he writes, demons often survive as figures of speech long after they have ceased to be figures of belief. Accordingly, the mention of a demon's name in a scriptural text is not automatic testimony to living belief in him. He further writes, Azazel suffers the same fate of all angels and spirits in scripture. They can represent the powers of the physical world, as seen in Psalms 104:4, 1488, but they are not deified, Deuteronomy 4:19 and Job 5:1, and their worship is prohibited, as seen in Exodus 20 verses 4-5, 22:19, and Deuteronomy 5 verses 7-8.
Yeah, I would say that the demonic understanding is probably the best, because the the parallelism between Yahweh and Azazel is one note, but like it would be really weird if that was like a mountain, or if that was like a place, or just a type of offering. The weird thing is that as a demon, there were plenty of demons that they thought, as you mentioned, like Lilith was one of them, for example, or many of them, I should say.
There's also in chapter 17, I think, the Seirim, which are also demons.
Yeah. So there's quite a few of them that are listed, and the thing is, they wouldn't really receive like entire text devoted to them or anything, so we shouldn't expect to have so much stuff about them. If this was like another god, then we probably would have had texts in like either like Mesopotamian or Hittite literature or something like that, and I don't think we actually have any of those. Like we have texts that show rites that are similar to this in other cultures that I noted, but none of them mention Azazel. Now the relation to Satan would be a far later identification. So I think, Tomer, you noted first Enoch, for example.
First Enoch, yeah.
Yeah, that would have been one of the places where you have something that's kind of close to this identity, where you have this this fallen angel that has to be, kind of thrown to the cosmic prisons, and or to the underworld prisons. It depends on which part of First Enoch you're reading, but the association with Satan would have been much later.
Yep. Yeah, I have here from Chizkuni, who says that Azazel is just an alternate word for Samael, which is the name of the angel that plays Satan.
Right.
I thought you said summer ale at first, which is why I'm thinking beer sounds good right
That's
about
also
now.
the name of a snake, orange snake.
Summer ale.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Samael.
I know.
Not summer ale.
Samael.
Yeah.
This would probably be some demonic thing, which
Yes.
we have plenty of evidence that they believed in those.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Trevor and Wright says, is there an organic connection between the purification laws and fasting in Exodus 34:27-28?
Oh, man, I have to go remind myself which one Exodus 34 is. Man, it all kind
the
of
fasting laws. I remember that one. This is where they have the actual 10 Commandments, or the one that the Bible calls.
Yeah, that's the one.
right,
I
that
don't,
one, yeah.
But
So you've
I
got
don't
the
think
Feast
it has.
of Leavened Bread and the Feast of Weeks and all that.
Yeah, I don't think it's really it is related to Yom Kippur though.
Right, yeah, it wouldn't be related to that.
No.
Yeah, but Yom Kippur has it does mention like, self-affliction on the day. I don't know if that's considered a purification ritual, or just marking the day as like super holy or whatever.
Yeah. I'll continue my commentary. Verse 11, bull for his own sin offering. Paran comments, in the section on the sin offerings in chapter 4, we read that an anointed priest, i.e. a high priest, who sins, must sacrifice a bull for a sin offering so to purify the tabernacle from the impurity that was latched to it. Since a high priest is allowed to enter the inner tabernacle, there's a great deal of danger in his sin, since the impurity which enters the tabernacle could withdraw God from his residence, and thus expose Israel to harsh dangers. The priest, therefore, sacrifices a bull of sin offering, whose blood is brought to the inner holy, and even sprinkled on the face of the curtain, the parochet, which beyond it lies the Holy of Holies. Thus, the priest removes the impurity which damages the tabernacle because of his sin. Verse 13, so that he will not die. Levine comments, the incense cloud served to protect the high priest while he stood in the immediate area of God's kavod, presence. Incense was widely used as an apotropaic substance or means of protection. In the ritual of Yom Kippur, the high priest drew extremely close to God's throne in the Holy of Holies and was therefore in danger, even though he had committed no wrongdoings and was in the Holy of Holies in accordance with God's instructions. All who stand in God's presence are in need of expiation in order to avert his wrath. Verse 16, the tent of meeting which is among them in the midst of their uncleanness. Paran comments, the tent of meeting resides at the heart of the camp and therefore could turn impure from any act of the individual or of the community. The individual's sin requires atonement only on the outer altar, whilst the community's sin and the high priest's sin required atonement at the inner holy. And anybody who has sinned usually sacrifices a sin offering to purify the temple from its impurities. But there are some sins that a man does unwillingly, and he's not aware that he has done them. Such sins also damage the holy, and the Yom Kippur ritual was meant to purify it from them. Verse 18, he shall come out to the altar. According to Chazal in Mishnah Yoma 5.5 and the Sifra, the altar mentioned here is the incense altar. While Levine supports this interpretation, some, like Josephus in Antiquities 3.243, Ibn Ezra and Milgrom, wrote that this refers to the sacrificial altar. Paran suggested that either two traditions are mixed here, or that this section describes a special ceremony exclusive to Yom Kippur, where the blood of the sin offering is used to atonement on the outer altar, which is not according to chapter 4. Verse 21, someone appointed for the task. In Hebrew, it's ish iti, which is a hapax. The etymology of iti is not clear. The verb et means time, and so could be rendered a person who is prepared from the day before, as Rashi renders it, a person available at a specific time, like Levine renders, or a man who is in readiness, as Septuagint and BDB render. Ibn Ezra adds that iti could refer to an individual whose custom it was to always lead the goat on Yom Kippur. According to the Mishnah Yoma 6.3, this person was a high priest.
So altar actually translates that as a man for the hour. The expression appears, it appears only here. The literal sense is a timely man. It probably indicates a man chosen to serve for this time and task.
Yeah. Verse 23.
Also known as the dude du jour.
Verse 23. This verse is problematic. If taken literally, Aaron had to re-enter the tent, take off his vestments, and go to the place of bathing while being nude, as seen in verse 24. Chazal in the Talmud Yoma 32a wrote that this chapter was in order until verse 23, where the first part of this verse, i.e., when he enters the tent, belongs after verse 25. They proposed, therefore, that Aaron disrobed after he performed the burnt and sin offerings. They also explained that the reason for the current arrangement is to keep all the rites performed in the linen garments in one unit. Levine, however, writes, this interpretation leaves certain questions unanswered. If the re-entry of the high priest is deferred at the end of verse 25, how is it that in verse 24 we read that he is to come out? Come out of where? To put it simply, the acts prescribed in verses 23 to 24 would seem to be in their proper sequence, but they are improper in themselves. A change of vestments would be appropriate following purification rites, and so would ablutions. What is improper is the place of the acts inside the tent, since disrobing there would constitute a serious breach of propriety. To resolve this problem, it is necessary to assume
It would
that
also
certain
establish
details...
a precedent still in practice today, at least with Christian churches.
To resolve this problem, it is necessary to assume that certain details are left unspecified in our chapter.
Yeah, my translation actually has a note here that says verse 23 was actually carried out after verse 28 rather than 25. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also got a handy little chart for the order of the services and like what clothes they wear and what was the reason. Maybe I'll go over that afterwards.
The reasons would be nice to know, actually, for that. I'd be curious to find out what they had in mind.
Yeah, so I guess I'll do it quickly. Yeah, so more or less it's like on Yom Kippur, the high priest would do all of the services in the temple. So he would do the morning services, the regular sacrifice and everything, and he would wear his golden garments, and then he would take off those and put on the white linen garments, and he would do the his own sin offering, which was atonement for impurity of the temple and sacrifices caused by priests. Then he would do the 2 goats and offer up the sin of the one that was for God as a sin offering that would atone for the impurity of temple and sacrifices caused by the people. The scapegoat atones for all other sins of the people, and then he would bring in the incense into the Holy of Holies, and that would be a spiritual elevation. Oh no, that's a very modern interpretation. Yeah, spiritual elevation of the people, and then he would put on the golden garments again, do the musaf, the extra festival sacrifice, and since it was not connected with the Holy of Holies, he would wear the golden garments. Then he would put the white garments back on and remove the spoon and the shovel, and that would complete it. And then that was when they put away the clothing, which is written in verse 23. Yeah, store away the clothing. And then he would do the afternoon services, and that would be it in golden.
Yeah, so here are actually some few things that Nihan notes about verse 23 here. So Curtin, who logically retains verses 23 through 24 in the first layer of Leviticus 16, must allege that the reference in verse 24 to the burnt offering on behalf of the people was interpolated later. However, there is no text-critical argument sustaining this view, and the reason appears to be circular. A more radical solution is advanced by Weffing, who finds the conclusion of the ritual for the atonement of the high priest in verse 14, thus escaping the problem raised by the conflation of the burnt offerings of the high priest and of the community in 23 and 24. Yet, not only is Weffing unable to explain the reference in verse 3, but as she has to admit, it is entirely unlikely that verse 14 could have formed once the conclusion of the ritual. At the very least, one would expect a statement on the purpose and significance of the sevenfold sprinkling of the blood of Aaron's purification offering in this verse, as found in verses 16 forward. Lastly, one should also note that the offering is a common feature throughout in P. It occurs consistently in the context of public ceremonies, as in Leviticus 8 and 9, so that their separation in Leviticus 16 appears all the more unlikely. In sum, the dissociation of the offerings of the high priest and of the community, and thus the reconstruction of a layer solely concerned with the high priest's atonement in Leviticus 16, are not justified from a source and literary critical perspective. On the contrary, the 2 motifs belong together exactly as in the ceremony of Leviticus 9, whose parallel with chapter 16 is obvious from a structural and functional viewpoint. If so, however, the description of the community in verse 15 clearly presupposes verses 5 and 9. One must conclude that in spite of the resumption of verse 6 in 11a, from a literary critical perspective, the ritual with the 2 goats in verses 5, 7, and 10 should also be regarded as original in Leviticus 16 and cannot be a later interpolation. So this is one of the things where you have like a doublet, but it's this is the one where it's more of a parallelistic kind of thing, instead of like the story where we get with like Moses, for example, where he hits the rock and gets water. Like one time God told him, the other time he didn't. But that would be like an example of a doublet where it's not exactly for parallelism. That would, like, the parallelism wouldn't quite make sense there. So in that example, it would be indicative of later authorship. But this one is functions as actual parallelism, as a literary feature. So
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else anybody listening in the chat or whatever has the same opinion of this that I do. But I mean, somebody just yesterday told me to go out and buy a Bible and read it and then tell me that evolution is true. That's
Wow.
yeah. Go read a Bible and then tell me that evolution is true.
Did you ask them which
Arn,
one?
we do
Because
have
you probably already
someone.
have it.
Arn, we do have someone in the chat who thinks that you all should learn to read Hebrew. Not kidding. Not kidding.
Yeah.
That's too funny.
Yeah.
Well done, Isaac. Well done.
there you go.
Yeah.
Put
I
that
can
in your
sh-
bowl
Yeah.
and smoke it, NRJ.
Yeah, if I could show.
Yeah,
I
and
could
for
show you
anybody
screen
that-
as well.
If you want to move the goalposts, Lorence here also does ancient Greek.
Yeah, well, you say also as if because I don't know Hebrew. I do know ancient Greek though. So, but the thing is, when I study a Hebrew text, I will check different translations. I will check notes on the translations. So I will see how they're translating it and why they're translating it that way. And I will also ask Tomer and Isaac. So, like, you can do biblical studies without knowing the original language. You just have to be careful about it. Knowing the original language helps, but even in that case, you still need to be careful about it, because there's no such thing as a perfect translation. And the thing is, the reading could be saying one thing, but our modern conception of the language and how it functioned back then could not be entirely accurate. So you could have it wrong. So it's not a very simple. It's not the very simple function of just knowing the language, although that does help. You can do studies like this without knowing the original language as much as it does help.
Where I was going with this is that same person who told me to go read a Bible and then tell him that evolution is true. He tells me that I need to have a proper understanding. And how reading the Bible gives me a proper understanding of evolution is a complete mystery. But as far as trying to get a proper understanding, if I was just reading the Bible by myself, I mean, I like to think that I'm a pretty smart guy, but I mean, how much can I really have gotten out of it? Would I have known any of the stuff that you're putting in? I'm not going to have any of this background information. I'm not going to know the original, not just the original language things. You know, it's all of the other things that your different backgrounds are bringing to this for the proper understanding part. If that's important, then this is the best way to read the Bible, I think. So I just wanted to express my appreciation for what we're doing here.
Yeah, because like I do my best to not misrepresent the text. I try my. The thing is, I think that the best way to understand it is through a historical critical lens. So we need to put it in its place historically before we can actually try to understand what it's saying, what it would have been saying to its ancient audience. And for that, like, that does require a lot of study. It requires a lot of research. And I have done studies on specifically a lot of apocalyptic stuff, Revelation. I did one on the Suffering Servant. Like, I spent a lot of time and research doing this because I want to properly understand it, because I know that over time things are lost. So I want to go back and put myself into the shoes of the people who would have been reading it initially, and why they would have been reading it a certain way. And I don't just jump to conclusions. I will research like motifs of the time, conceptual worldviews of the time that would have influenced their interpretation. Like, it's not a simple thing, and it goes far beyond just knowing the language.
So I don't want people to be misled by the title of this show. I mean, yeah, we're all blasphemers, but I mean, the point of what we're doing is not just to bash the Bible. I mean, the point is to is to understand it as well as possible, to steelman it, if you will. I mean, if that is possible. So again, I'm going to read another comment that came up. M. Doug says, offers £5 and says, the end of verse 27 says burnt up in the NIV. Is this incinerate rather than burnt, that means roast?
The Hebrew is v'salfu ba'esh, which means and they burnt in the fire or by fire. So
Yeah, I think it means
don't-
totally burned in this case because
Yeah,
it's talking about
they-
like
we
the waste and
incinerate.
stuff.
yeah,
They shall burn their hides in fire.
incinerate. I think it's more accurate. Yes.
Okay.
I'll finish my commentary. It's only 2 comments. Verse 29. A lasting ordinance for you. Milgrom comments, the people are addressed for the first time. Heretofore, they were referred to in the first person. Moreover, they played no part whatever in the sanctuary ritual. Even their offerings were brought not by them, but by Aaron in verse 5. Additionally, the entire ritual was addressed to Moses, who, in turn, is to impart it to Aaron, but not directed to Israel, as in verses 1 to 2. Thus, this switch to second person, direct address to Israel, is the first of several signs that this and the following verses comprise an appendix to the text. And finally, verse 33, the most holy place. In Hebrew, it's Mikdash HaKodesh. Again, Milgrom comments, this expression for the adytum, i.e. for the Holy of Holies, is a hapax. Because Kodesh here means sanctuary and not adytum, as seen in verses 2 to 28, or shrine, the writer was forced to eschew the terminology of both this chapter and P and to devise his own. He chose Mikdash, whose absolute form is probably Mikdesh, on the analogy of misped, mourning. It occurs once again, Mikdasho, its holiest portion, in Numbers 18:29, where the vocalization leads to the inference that the absolute form is probably Mikdesh, and certainly not Mikdash, which would have yielded Mikdasho. In any event, this term for adytum is strong evidence that the author of verses 29 to 34 is not the same as that of verses 2 to 28. The objects of the purging are all direct, indicated by it, as in verse 20. And that's it
Okay.
for this chapter.
All right. So
Yeah,
the next
two more
chapter is
comments.
only the next chapter is only 15 verses. I'd be happy to read that one.
Sure.
So I'm
Oh
gonna
yeah, his
dive-
favorite.
Actually, 16.
Yeah. I'm going to dive
Number
into it.
16.
The Lord said to Moses, speak to Aaron and his sons and to all the Israelites, and say to them, this is what the Lord has commanded. Any Israelite who sacrifices an ox, a lamb, or a goat in the camp or outside of it, instead of bringing it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to present it as an offering to the Lord in front of the tabernacle of the Lord, that person shall be considered guilty of bloodshed. They have shed blood and must be cut off from their people. This is so the Israelites will bring to the Lord the sacrifices they are now making in the open fields. They must bring them to the priest, that is, to the Lord, and at the entrance to the tent of meeting, and sacrifice them as fellowship offerings. The priest is to splash the blood against the altar of the Lord at the entrance of the tent and meeting, and burn the fat as an aroma pleasing to the Lord. They must no longer offer any of their sacrifices to the great idols to whom they prostitute themselves. This is to be a lasting ordinance for them and for the generations to come. Say to them, any Israelite or any foreigner residing among them who offers a burnt offering or sacrifice and does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to sacrifice it to the Lord must be cut off from the people of Israel. I will set my face against any Israelite or any foreigner residing among them who eats blood, Isaac, and I will cut them off from the people. For the life of the creature is in the blood, and I have given it to you to make atonement for yourselves on the altar. It is the blood that makes atonement for one's life. Therefore, I say to the Israelites, none of you may eat blood, nor may any resident residing among you eat blood. Any Israelite or any foreigner residing among you who hunts any animal or bird, because birds are somehow different from animals, that may be eaten must drain out the blood and cover it with earth, because the life of every creature is its blood. And that's why I have said to the Israelites, you must not eat the blood of any creature, because the life of every creature is its blood. Anyone who eats it must be cut off, because I like to repeat myself a bunch. Anyone, whether native born or foreigner, who eats anything found dead or torn by wild animals must wash their clothes and bathe with water, and they will be ceremonially unclean until evening. Then, somehow, miraculously, they'll be clean again. But if they do not wash their clothes and bathe themselves, they will be held responsible.
Yeah, so there are a few things about this this chapter that because my dumb ass got ahead of myself, I was thinking of something else. But yeah, there are so there are multiple laws here. Is the thing. There are at least 5 of them, right? Yeah, there are five instructions. So you can kind of see how it kind of transitions, right? It goes from like slaughters to, like slaughters at the temple to eating the blood. Like it goes like step-by-step process until eventually you're at a different law altogether. So so they're built on the same general structure, but the thing is there are a lot of differences that kind of speak to so each law shows some variation, so it's not actually possible to reconstruct a single coherent form in spite of the many attempts that have been made to do that. So because they share a similar structure, people have tried to be like, oh, this is from like the same this is from like the same tradition and whatnot. But it's not quite that simple, because while the structure is generally the same, there are nuances in the Hebrew, at least, that kind of speak against that in their formation. So the first 2 laws both contain a clause stating that the case consists in the omission of a certain action. So bring a sacrificial animal to the sanctuary, which has no equivalent in the following 3 laws. And like there are like little differences here and there on the actual syntax, I guess, and that has caused quite a lot of debate.
And I have to wonder how Jewish people do their barbecues.
Oh, not well.
Well, it sounds like they would do it well. Well done.
Oh, well, yeah, very well done.
Yeah, well done.
Perhaps too well done.
That's
Yes,
God's
indeed.
favorite roasting.
He loves.
Yeah,
He loves well
What was the
done.
word you used for incinerate?
Salful.
Speaking
Yeah.
of, I'm probably gonna get some lamb chops later. That sounds pretty good.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kosher meat
let's
can also
start
be
talking
pretty
about food
salty.
already. All right, so I got another couple comments. So let me see. Did I read this one? Is there any connection between the
No.
613?
No,
Oh
you
yeah,
did.
this was
You
Trevor
didn't.
Wright. Says, is there any connection between the 613 laws in Exodus and the purification laws in Leviticus, and did it influence the priesthood?
Well, the 613 laws in Exodus, there are Exodus
part
doesn't
of
have
it.
all the 613 laws. It spreads throughout the Torah, so I
Yeah.
don't
it's
understand.
part
So
of
these
They
yeah,
are
so these
part of it.
purification laws, like last chapter, last episode, for example, there were like all the stuff about the purification of the tzara'at, the skin condition, and the discharge and stuff. There was like 11 of the 613, and
Yeah.
when we finished this section, was going to be another 26 plus 2, yeah, 28 total in this section as well. So each chapter you're going to get a bit more of the 613.
Yes.
Okay. M. Doug offers £2 and says, a shame. Black pudding is delicious. And then Natalie Dickey offers $6.66 and says Bible audiobook read by Aaron Ra et al. When? Hell, I'll put one together.
Oh wait, is this
there
the,
was
I
a
think this
comment.
is I think this is the same Natalie on my friends list. Hello, Natalie.
There was a comment earlier that I think didn't get put in the list here, which was there was a conversation in the chat about Aramaic and Hebrew, and so someone asked a question, asking.
I don't think it was directed to Peter. It was directed to somebody in the chat.
I think I saw something that
Oh,
what,
wait,
someone
maybe
did try
yeah,
and
I
said
think
something like, "Oh, regarding the chat, the private chat,
yeah, okay,
the
yeah, I
not-
see it.
regarding the conversation in chat, what did the panel think of the connection between and I mean, I would say that one of the interesting things is that Hebrew, as written these days, the Hebrew alphabet that you're most familiar with is actually Aramaic. It comes
Yes.
from an Aramaic alphabet,
Yeah.
which comes from the Phoenician Canaanite.
Yeah, it's Phoenician
alphabet,
based.
so it's very
Yes.
similar. So the old Hebrew alphabet is more or less identical to like what you would think of as Phoenician, and then the
Yeah.
Aramaic version is like
Yeah.
a more
It's known
slow
commonly as
version.
Imperial Aramaic, and it's very similar in a lot of ways. Similar to syntax.
So the modern Hebrew script is sometimes called Ashurit, which means Assyrian.
Yeah.
It's like the Assyrian. It's not identical to Imperial Aramaic. You can write in an Imperial Aramaic and it looks different, but it's much more similar.
I've been
Shall we
thinking
move
about
on?
actually studying on this. That could be fun. Yeah, let's go ahead.
Shall we move on to unlawful sexual relations?
Wait, I haven't finished my commentary. I haven't started it. I haven't
Two
even
things.
started it.
Two things. So yes, Tomer needs to finish his commentary, and second, we should leave chapter 18 for Wednesday because
Okay.
everyone is going to have a thing to say on it, or a lot of things to say on it. Like I'm gonna have a lot of commentary. Tomer's gonna have a lot of commentary.
It's only
Maybe we should break it up.
I don't know if
we
I'll
need-
be able to make
Trust
it.
me,
though.
trust me, no. You're
I
gonna
really wanna go
you're
back.
gonna want one episode on just that because there's so much to unpack.
I am looking forward
Yeah.
to this.
promise you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
definitely.
Verse 3. Who sacrifices? In Hebrew, it's yishchat, from the root shin chet tet. According to Levine, this root has two meanings. One, to slaughter in the general sense, or two, to slaughter a sacrifice. The exact meaning of shachat is crucial here, since verses 3 to 4 seem to contradict Deuteronomy 12, verses 15 to 16, which states that the Israelites are allowed to slaughter animals for food as long as they do not drink their blood. In the Talmud, Chulin 17a, there's a debate between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ishmael regarding this issue. Rabbi Akiva argued that the law was talking about sacrificial animals, hence slaughter by other means is permitted. Rabbi Ishmael disagreed and said that the law states that all animals that are intended for food must be offered as a sacrifice, and therefore prohibits non-sacrificial slaughter. Most traditional commentators and some modern like Levine support Rabbi Akiva's position. However, according to Levine, a large body of scholars, including Milgrom, support Rabbi Ishmael's position that Leviticus 17 represents an earlier stage in the history of Israelite worship when all animal slaughter had to be of sacred character.
So I don't know if I would call it early. Like maybe with some earlier scholarship, perhaps it would have been considered early. But because we've talked about the dating of these texts so much, it wouldn't really be. Like it might have like earlier roots conceptually, but the thing is with it would have been a long lasting kind of thing, so it would be hard to nail it down to like an early strand, I would say. But some of this kind of goes back, at least with blood being life. I think so. Milgrom has a quite a long section on this in his commentary, and he with the blood being connected to life and all that. Now, of course, they would have noticed that if something lost a lot of blood, it would die. That is not something that would have went over their heads. So he points out some similarities to actually the Epic of Gilgamesh with that. So Yeah, the fundamental question is this: why does the priestly account concede meat to Noah rather than to Adam, who instead is explicitly ordained as a vegetarian in Genesis? Was there an earlier tradition that carnivorous humans represent a later stage in the history of the human race? And then he notes, of course, the Epic of Gilgamesh. The key to this channel of influence is that after the flood, the animals will be in, quote, the fear and dread of you, Genesis 9:2, implying that heretofore humans were not just vegetarian but friends of the animals. However, with the concession of meat, humans became hunters. Note the relevant passage from Gilgamesh. On seeing him, Enkidu, who is, of course, the model for the biblical Adam, the gazelles ran off. The wild beasts of the steppe drew away from his body, but now he had wisdom, a broader understanding. The harlot says to him, to Enkidu, thou art wise, Enkidu, art become like a god. Why with the wild creatures dost thou roam over the steep? Food, meat, they placed before him. He gagged. Nothing does Enkidu know of eating food. So,
I always thought that Enkidu was Unkidori.
yeah, I bet you did.
Yep. Sorry.
Eric
I'm-
Wander
I know,
offers
I know, I'm
or
sorry.
gifted one RN Raw membership. I'm going to read that chat, so did. Lawrence, we need to talk more about when some other time. I'd like to talk to you about the Enkidu Adam connection.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot there. I'm going to be honest right now. So my knowledge on that is pretty tertiary so far. But I know I want to do a study on that because there have been a lot of ideas thrown around about the origins of the Adam and Eve narrative. And
I've got Adapa and Enki and Ninhursag, where Enki is wandering through the garden of what I presume is the garden of Inanna, that being presided by Ninhursag, and that's all I've got. So
Yeah.
like those two primary myths. I mean, the idea of Enkidu being a template for Adam is fascinating to me, but I would like to know what's the best source I can look into to find that out. What did you said? There's different ideas being thrown out.
Yeah.
Throw me
There's
some links if you would, because I'm
Sure.
interested to know.
There was a work that was written in, was it 2015? I want to say maybe a little earlier. It's called The Mythology of Eden. It was from Arthur and Alina George. Really nice people. The thing is, I am not sure if their scholarship was even up to date at the time, because reading through it, they were presupposing the original documentary hypothesis dating. They went in with that as a presupposition, and like the thing is, I'd have to reread their work and see, because they have a lot of interesting parallels with other myths, which fair enough, but the dating does help tie in certain myths. So if we date something differently, would we come up with a different related myth? And that's something that I do want to do, like a deeper dive into. But I know that there's the span of disagreement on this is pretty huge. But all of them do maintain that for the most part, it was based on earlier myths. That is still maintained, but which myths those are often argued about. And there's a paper that was written by Kenton Sparks, where he talks about the different types of myths that could have been told, all the different reasons that they would have been told, and he uses the Genesis myth of the fall, I should say, which by the way doesn't share any ancient Near Eastern parallels. That would have been on its own. So I want to do more of a deep dive into all that stuff because it is endlessly fascinating. But I know that like right now my knowledge on it is pretty tertiary, I'd say. So I want to do a deeper study into it. But I have a few books that I could read, that I could also recommend to you. But
Yeah, I'm interested to look into it because it's a subject I've always been interested in, and I certainly want to pursue it, but at another time, so we don't distract. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter here because we're going to be doing a short show if we don't do 18.
Yeah, that's fine. Trust me, you're gonna want 18 on its own.
Okay, well, we will do
Okay.
18 on its own then. And I guess we'll just close out early. I've got a bunch
Wait,
of
I
things I have.
haven't finished
needs his
my
commentary.
commentary.
No, close out quickly. Don't let him have a second.
Yeah, people forget. Verse 4, that person shall be considered guilty of bloodshed. They have shed blood. The Hebrew idiom dam shafach, to shed blood, usually refers to murder, as seen in Genesis 9:6, Numbers 35:33, and Deuteronomy 21:7. According to Levine, the usage of the idiom is exceptional and an example of a hyperbole. He also writes,
Hyperbole.
Hyperbole.
hyperbole. My English is perfect.
No
When
worries.
this verse is compared with Genesis 9 verses
Oh,
1
that's
to
a tough one.
6, an interesting difference emerges. Genesis 9 verses 1 to 4 grants permission to humans and to consume the meat of living creatures, as long as no blood is eaten. Immediately following this dispensation in verses 5 to 6 is the statement that all who shed the blood of other humans shall be put to death. The two situations are thus contrasted. It is permitted to slaughter animals for food but prohibited to shed blood. In our verse, slaughter of animals for sacrifice at the wrong site is equated with the shedding of blood. As is often the case, biblical statements draw on other preceding verses, lending a different nuance to traditional language.
So it's okay to murder over here, but not behind the tree, behind the back of the house, right? Gotcha. Okay.
Verse 6.
I just want to clarify.
Verse 6, Milgrom comments, why repeat the Shelamim procedure already detailed in chapter 3? One answer is that the Shelamim offering in chapter 3 is restricted to 3 specific motivations: thanksgiving, vows, and free will offerings, as seen in 7 verses 11 to 21, whereas the motivation for Shelamim in this passage is to provide meat. The instructions are therefore repeated to indicate that the procedure remains the same. In truth, however, not all the instructions are repeated, just the disposition of the blood and suet. The reader would still have to refer to chapter 3 for the complete procedure. A more likely answer is that the blood and suet prescriptions are emphasized as a pointed polemic against chthonic worship, thus the object of which is the pouring of the blood and suet into the ground. Verse 7, the goat idols. I think you missed the goats here when you read this verse. It's goat idols. In Hebrew, it's seirim. It is unanimously agreed among commentators that this refers to demons, specifically satyrs, as the word seirim means hairy ones. Ibn Ezra, for example, writes, seirim are the demons. They are so called because the body of one who sees them storms. In Hebrew, yista'er. However, it appears that they are so called because the insane see them in the form of goats, i.e. seirim. According to Isaiah 13:21 and 34:14, the seirim dwell in open lands and ruins. According to Milgrom, a tablet from Ebla tells of a goat rite for the purification of a mausoleum in connection with royal ceremonies. He also writes, Erhard Gerstenberger, who claims that all of the priestly literature is post-exilic, has to admit that the statement alleging Israelite worship of satyrs is anachronistic. Bernd Janowski suggests that our verse is a post-exilic polemic against foreign gods. Support for which is 2 Chronicles 11:15, which avers that Jeroboam established seirim and calves for his shrines. However, it is more likely that the chronicler utilized our verse to label North Israel as worshipping satyrs. Levine acutely recognizes that 17:7 forbids the worship of satyr demons, which were mandated by the official religion in chapter 16, i.e. Azazel. This blatant contradiction can be explained by positing that Leviticus 17 belongs to a new source. Namely, it is part of a polemic against P, and it may account for the contiguity of these two chapters. And I think this chapter 17 is the beginning of the Book of Holiness, or the Holiness Code.
It is, yep, Holiness Code.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Just, by the way, it's Satyr, not Satyr.
Yes, Satyr.
Satyr?
Satyr.
Oh, my
Yeah.
English is
It's a
perfect.
tough one. No, it's a tough one.
It's not really an English word, so
yeah.
yeah.
So I
But don't worry about the correction. You're satyr but wiser.
So yeah, but the thing is, I mean, go demons of any kind. These wouldn't, like, again, these would probably be connected to Azazel, right? But they are not. We shouldn't think of them as like, you know, the Greek satyr necessarily, because they could have had like similar origins, right? Because then you talk about, you know, Indo-European languages and how they kind of track, but even then that's hypothetical and has its own issues.
Well, I mean, Indo-European is separate from Like
No, I
the
know, but saying that
Canaanite.
as a stem for like if you're talking about migration, right? So as a stem, if you're going from North Africa to like Israel, Canaan, Saudi Arabia, that kind of Near Eastern area, and then you go up to the Mediterranean. Like the thing is, language myths will all be carried in different ways and change over time. So they could have had like the similar roots in something like a goat demon, and then in Greece they become satyrs, and here they'd become Azazel or something. So the idea would have been not just because when people say satyr, you get the the Greek idea of a satyr.
I
But
think the Greeks might have got it from the northeast Africa, whatever that area is called.
Well, like I said, like you can't. It's really hard to kind of track a lot of these things, especially since a lot of it is theoretical. So it's not set in stone, and so we should keep that in mind. But I wouldn't use the word satyr because of the Greek connotations. So I think goat demon is it's more generalized. So I think it'd be better.
Yeah, here it just says demons.
Right, yeah, but they would be goat demons. Yeah.
I think JPS also renders it goat demons as well. Okay, verse 8. Any foreigner residing among them. According to Paran, the foreigner was considered of a low economic status, and their social and legal status was loose. The Torah warns of doing wrongs to the foreigner, as seen in Leviticus 19:33 and Deuteronomy 24:17, and so do prophets, as Jeremiah 7:6, Ezekiel 22:29, and Zechariah 7:10. Because of the foreigner's status, God had to protect them. God loves the foreigner, according to Deuteronomy 10:18, protects him, as seen in Psalms 146:9, and commands in several places to keep the foreigners' rights and avoid hurting them.
Yeah. Just by the way, the word foreigner sometimes is interpreted to mean converts, and the word for convert in Hebrew is ger, which
Gel,
mean,
yeah, that's the Hebrew
the
here
same
is
word
gel.
which is used here. So it could mean non-Israelites who lived in the same country and had to keep the law to a certain extent, or it could refer to converts, people that went
it could
of the blood but had.
it could also refer to sojourners, as according to BDB
Yeah,
Dictionary.
Yeah,
Yes,
sojourners would make more sense there because that's how that's usually how it's used, I would think.
I'm hesitant. I'm the only one here that doesn't speak multiple languages, but I'm still going to have to correct. It's not sojourner. It's sojourner.
Yeah, I think.
So there has been debate since late antiquity about whether the verb refers to the one who slaughters. I should say that in verse 3. There's been debate as to whether it refers to general slaughter for the purpose of eating or slaughtering for the purpose of sacrifice. There are grounds to conclude that in the early biblical period, there was no such thing as secular slaughter, and when it's used there, that would be just for the food. For slaughter was regularly associated with offering some part of the animal as a sacrifice. That appears to be assumption of this law. Slaughtering outside the camp entails the danger of sacrifice to the feral or vegetal deities of the open field, and so the animal must be brought to the sanctuary. This ban on secular slaughter, pointedly permitted by Deuteronomy, logically implies, as Milgrom argues at length, that local sanctuaries are envisaged by the law, where people living in the immediate region could bring the animals as offerings before consuming a large part of them. I mean, there would be, whether or not they tried to regulate it, there are going to be people who hunt for food. Like, that's just gonna happen, my guy. No, and it might not be the way of the faith, but it still would have been. Actually, I think what was it? So with this part, the southern region of Judah would have already been in modern terms industrialized. It would have been far larger. It would have attained the same heights as the northern kingdom in the 8th century. So it's very likely they would have had, yeah, they definitely still had like local sanctuaries and all that, but the idea of there being when they're talking about the early biblical period, I think there still would have been secular slaughter, even though like, but the thing is, who would write it down is the thing. They would just eat, right? So you wouldn't really need a prescription for something like that. And I think it's a very limited view that they would be going into if they were to say, well, for whatever reasons, there was no secular slaughter. It was only like it had to be partially sacrificial, and it might have been, but people still had to eat. So
It's incredible how hungry that one gets the less they focus on ritual and just want to put things into their mouths to consume.
damn straight. Like you know, speaking of last night, so we were really busy at work, and we have like a restaurant that's like right there. Like we have like a sliding door between us and the restaurant, and like usually I pick up some food before I leave, but they were so busy and we were so busy I didn't get a chance to. So I went to go get a pizza, and I ate half a pizza last night. And I woke up and my stomach was just in knots. I was just like, oh man, I can't,
That'll happen.
can't have a pizza in one sitting anymore.
No,
I just wanted to get some food.
not since I was 15. I'll tell you that.
Right.
Got a couple more comments to read. Eric Wander says only Levites in the tabernacle can offer sacrifices to God, or non-Levites can also offer sacrifices to God, like in 1 Samuel 1 and 7. And then Elkanah was not a Levite.
I think they can.
Yes, everyone can bring sacrifices, but
Isn't
the
that the
Levites...
Thanksgiving offering? No,
yeah, so anyone can bring a sacrifice, but and anyone
Shinamim?
can sacrifice can slaughter the sacrifice, but taking it up to the altar and burning it had to be done by a priest.
Yes,
exactly. I don't think Levites could do that either.
Yeah.
Then Celion D comments, says, wait, how can the foreigner be both loved and enslaved?
Yeah, I don't know who said...
That's Christianity. No, I'm kidding.
I don't know who said they were enslaved.
I'm not kidding. That's totally right.
No one said that they were enslaved. It's just that they were... I think Thomas said they were economically...
Yeah, they were economically considered low status. Social legal status was also not great.
Just don't forget, boys and girls, there ain't no love like Christian hate. Or is it the other way around?
And then M. Doug says, it sounds like jizya for non-Israel. Say it again?
Jizya.
Jizya is the tax that non-Muslims have to pay to a Muslim.
Yeah, I've exhausted my one attempt to correct Tomer's pronunciation. He's going to dive back on me now. And anyway, the rest of it sounds like jizya for non-Israelites. Is that a fair thought?
Still don't know what they were talking about, but yeah, these foreigners or converts or whatever, they had to keep certain laws, but they weren't given like they weren't enslaved, and they weren't given a tax that they had to pay. It was more like they had to keep certain laws, like trying to think of a good example. Like they didn't have to keep all the laws. They weren't allowed to, for example, keep the Sabbath, but they had to and certain things they had to. It's kind of like they were in like a sort of quasi-Jewish state. But that was more probably as a sort of like the Jewish law was used as the secular law of the country. Oh,
no, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is going on with us?
Something.
Yeah.
The server's having a seizure, I think, on
There
our
we go.
side.
Yeah, seemingly.
For some reason, StreamYard is messing up. I have no clue what's going on.
No, I kind of fucked up there. I was
that
yeah,
too,
I
but
accidentally left.
I couldn't get the screen back up for some reason. No clue what happened.
Okay.
But
I'll
anyway.
continue. I continue my commentary.
Oh man.
I know. Yeah. Verse 10. Against any Israelite or any foreigner residing among them who eats blood. So Paran
Sorry
comments.
about that.
Yeah, it's a good example.
Yeah. According to the Torah, this is a very ancient prohibition, and it's one of the commandments that were given to Noah and his sons in Genesis 9:4. Limiting the applicability of the law in our verse to the Israelites and foreigners obviously contradicts the commandment in Genesis. But it seems that this limitation does not intend to exclude foreigners from the prohibition. The viewpoint of the law is Israelite, and therefore the legislator's appeal is for the Israelites alone. He emphasizes the prohibition on the Israelites specifically because they especially need to be holier than the other nations, as seen in 2024.
Oh yeah, that's why I say to, and therefore I say to the children of Israel, none of you should eat blood. The convert who lives among you should not eat blood. But yeah, so they weren't allowed to eat blood either, but he says it to the Israelites. Yeah.
Vampires are flat out.
Oh, definitely.
Now, verse 11, it is the blood that makes atonement for one's life. Levine comments, basic to the theory of sacrifice in ancient Israel, as in many other ancient societies, was the notion of substitution. The sacrifice substituted for an individual human life or for the lives of the members of the community in situations where God could have exacted the life of the offender or of anyone else for that matter. Indeed, all who stood in God's immediate presence risked becoming the object of divine wrath. But substitution could avert the danger, with sacrificial blood being especially instrumental because it was the symbol of life. This explains the specific intent of the Hebrew formula lechaper al nafshotechem, for making expiation for your lives. Literally, the formula means to serve as kofer, ransom for your lives. God accepts the blood of the sacrifices in lieu of human blood. The practice of offering blood on the altar may have been very ancient, harking back to the worship of chthonic deities to the netherworld. In biblical religion, it appears to have been an act of contrition, an acknowledgement of God's power over life and death. Verse 13.
The obsession with blood is just absolutely just baffling to me.
I don't know there, Muddy Chicken. You seem pretty obsessed with blood. You got all that blood in your body.
I mean,
storing that all for yourself there, buddy.
It's all for me. I'm not going to share with anyone. You can't have my blood. It's too precious to me.
And my final comment on verse 13, cover it with earth. Several explanations have been given for this commandment. Rashbam, Chizkuni, and Gersonides wrote that this is given so that other people won't ingest the blood. Luzzatto suggested that this was done so that the blood wouldn't be suspected of being human blood that could pollute the ground. Milgrom notes that some scholars, based on Ezekiel 24:7, think that this order was given so that the blood won't cry out for vengeance. He writes, however, that Ezekiel 24:7 refers to human blood and does not apply to animals that may be killed with impurity. Instead, he suggests that the blood was covered so that it wouldn't be used in chthonic rites, i.e. for divination. He also likes the explanation given by August Dillman and Victor Reisel, that the blood would return to God, who granted nefesh, spirit, not only to human beings, but also to animals. And that's it for my commentary on this chapter.
I do want to bring a little bit of there's some other commentaries that talk about why God doesn't want people to eat blood, and it's interesting as well because it talks about I'll just say it. So Maimonides, he says that the reason is to stop people stop the Israelites from practicing occult rituals because other pagans and stuff would use blood. And so if they didn't eat it, then that would kind of distance themselves from
I think that's Maimonides' default solution for everything that Israelites were prohibited to. It's idol worshipping.
The Chaldean practice, summoning demons by using pools of blood and eating blood in an attempt to enhance the power of prophecy. But Nachmanides, he says, if a person eats the blood of an animal, the animal's soul becomes connected with the person and will bestow animalistic characteristics upon him.
Oh man, I love
you are what you eat.
Oh man, that is so good. That is so good. There have been so many TV shows and books written with that kind of thing in mind.
Man, I'm thinking of every death metal concert I've ever been to in my life with guys just fake eating blood or whatever, and they're just going to a freaking metal rage.
Damn straight, I'll get you going.
Right? That's just going through my head right about now. I think the TV show Vikings, didn't they do something like that too, where they consumed blood and went nuts? I could be completely wrong. I didn't watch the show.
There was in Supernatural, there was the episode where there was this dude who is like eating the hearts of certain animals to gain their powers. So if he eats like
Now that's an old tradition.
Right, yeah.
A lot
So
of different religions, yeah.
that one, yeah, that one. Oh boy, I can tell you some stories about that one.
Yeah, you me both.
There was a pirate there was a pirate Lolane who was set to do that too, and he not Lolane, but the guy that in the show, he would, like if he ate like a snake, you get like snake eyes, and he would like move as fast as a snake, and he'd be able to constrict people like a snake, like stuff like that. So it's fun stuff.
Likewise with the Vargar, of course, they would put on wolf hides, and I don't remember whether it was psilocybin mushrooms or whatever it was, but they took some kind of hallucinogenic narcotic kind of thing. They drugged themselves up and dressed up like wolves in wolf skins, and so that they thought that gave them the power of wolves. And this lends a bit to the werewolf legend. And then another version of that in Scandinavia, people would put on shirts made of bear fur and do exactly the same thing, except that instead of getting the powers of bears, they would become bears. That's what they thought. And
Berserkers?
Exactly. The bear shirt or bear sark.
Right. Oh, right. Bear sark. Yeah.
Berserkers. I think you're thinking about too much of the worlds of what is it? Pathfinder right about now.
Trevor and Wright says there seems to be a dominant theme throughout the Bible as a means of always depicting himself as a great god that mirrors the Canaanite god Baal.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Ironic, isn't it?
Yes. And then
it's
Dr.
almost like
Dino.
it's connected somehow.
Yeah, almost.
Dr. Dino offers $5 and says, question: why can't creationists accept that birds are dinosaurs? It's like covering your eyes at a rock concert and saying guitars don't exist.
Wait, they do?
No.
I've never heard of a guitar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me neither.
I've never heard a
don't-
guitar. Wait,
I
that doesn't
don't-
sound right.
Guitar?
I don't have a
Guitar?
guitar in my position right now. I don't know.
Yeah. So the reason that they can't accept that is
What's
because
the
the Bible says there's a beast kind and there's a bird kind, or there's lots of bird kinds and kinds of kinds within birds. But that's the problem. You can't have a mix of the bird kind and the beast kind. And what the hell are most of the dinosaurs?
I think it's a problem with a lot of people, the layperson, when they think of the word dinosaur, they're not using cladistics. They're using a colloquial meaning. And for them, dinosaurs are, ancient reptiles. And sometimes these people mistakenly include things that are not dinosaurs, like plesiosaurs and whatever, and pterosaurs.
I can absolutely attest to that. Because
Yeah,
seems to
and-
be the case with a lot of Americans, at least. They have a very bad education because of all the cartoons and whatnot that had all these really cool dinosaurs and whatnot all throughout the times that we've been around. And they just never got educated properly on it. And very few go further than that.
Yeah, there was a creationist that was arguing that mammoths are dinosaurs.
No.
You go into when you go pick up any of the little plastic, the prehistoric plastic play set, there's always a mammoth in there. You get the brontosaurus, you get the pterosaur, you might get a stegosaurus and a triceratops. You get like 3 or 4 actual dinosaurs.
I was thinking about this. I almost wonder if creationists, maybe there's a creationist that can answer this question for me, but I always wondered perhaps it's the fact that anything that's been long dead or extinct, that's tens of thousands of years old or even 10,000 years old, that's automatically considered a dinosaur kind.
I've actually heard creationists say anything big and dead.
Big and wow. You see, you just proved my point for me.
I think a pretty common one that people think is a dinosaur is Dimetrodon.
Yep.
Which is a.
So what you're saying is that Andre the Giant is a dinosaur? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Obviously,
he's big and dead.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, he kind of fits. Yeah, I get it. And then Kicker White Lion says, I just realized that Isaac's last name implies that he has Ra's skin.
Oh, jeez, I didn't see it that way.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty funny.
No, it's
That's
Ra's
skin of
kin.
Ra.
Ra's kin, yeah.
The kin of Ra.
Or
Okay.
he is Aaron's skin, as in he is Ra skin.
Like
Also,
a
but yeah,
berserker. But
speaking-
I'm not a
speaking-
berserker. I'm an Aaron Ra berserker.
Speaking of big wrestlers and dinosaurs, you guys know who Luchasaurus is?
Who?
Luchasaurus?
Luchasaurus is
Oh,
one of
no.
the best. He's so great. So, of course, his gimmick is that he's a
Oh.
dinosaur, and he's so good. He's this big dude, like 6'6" or something. Like he's a tall guy. And when he made his debut in AEW, he was paired up with this dude Jungle Boy, who is, but you guys know the actor Luke Perry.
Yeah.
Jungle Boy is his son, and they were so great. They were so great together because he'd like come in like riding on his shoulders and whatnot, and he's just this big
Oh.
dinosaur. He's it was really funny. He
Looking up images now.
when he had his
Looks like,
birthday.
looks like he might have sung for Guar at one point.
Yeah, right. So there was I think he was like, oh yeah, I am 60 million years old, but on my next birthday I'm going to be 60 million and 1 years old, or 360 million, whatever it is. But yeah, he would like add just one to that general year. It was pretty funny, really good stuff.
That's really great.
All right. Don't know how we got on that topic, but all right. So we're going to be doing Leviticus 18 on Wednesday.
Yeah.
I will try to make it. I might be able to. I don't want to miss it, so we'll see if I can be there.
And
Yeah,
I'll try
well,
to
we will-
improve my English.
You do
and
that.
hopefully we'll have
The
Lilith
episode
back
will-
by then.
I'll
The
give you
episodes
some
definitely will
letters
not
on
be
there.
monetized.
All right. If anybody else, somebody's got a closing comment that I'm going to say.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So tomorrow we're starting the Johannine epistles on Atheist Sunday School. We're getting very close to Revelation, so I'm very excited to cover the Johannine epistles, and it's a really interesting set of texts. So make sure to join us tomorrow for that. And we have a Discord server where Isaac and Tomer are always in voice chat, and they're always saying sweet nothings to each other. It's really, really nice.
Yeah, and you
It's
never
true.
visit.
It's true.
Once
Yeah,
in a
you
while
never
I'm
do,
there.
Lawrence. You're never there.
So yeah, we're all in there. Go join us. We can talk about a whole bunch of stuff. We got a pretty dope meme page too. So
And we also play GeoGuessr sometimes.
Link to the Discord server is in the chat.
We should do that this week.
Yeah.
Thank you
I'll be
much,
down.
guys. See you Wednesday.
Bye.
Thank you all.